Today, I have a story for you about 5 queen ants and their journeys to start new colonies. It's been over a month now since this adventure began, and the last several weeks have held joyful breakthroughs and major challenges. At first glance, ants in test tubes may not seem like much of a story, but these are the humble beginnings of what I hope will become thriving ant colonies. However, the founding process is the most strenuous undertaking in the life of a queen ant. Their performance over the next couple months will mean life or death for their future dynasties. So, let's meet the queens and follow the growth of their colonies from the very beginning. Okay, maybe not the very beginning. This is actually week 2 because I didn't think that I'd be making a video, but it's become such an exciting part of my week every Saturday, I just had to. We'll start with our first carpenter ant queen. She's darker in color than the others, so I think she might be a different species. She didn't have any eggs last week, so these 4 eggs is a big jump forward. I'm thinking about naming this colony something with an adventure or explorer theme like Indiana Jones or Tomb Raider. We'll see. Queen 2 still has her wings, which most likely means she's a virgin. But in hopes that she miraculously proves us wrong, I'm calling her Queen Mary. Next up, we have what I've identified as a golden carpenter ant queen. In 1 week, she's gone from 3 eggs to 7, and by the way she was guarding them like precious treasure, I decided to name her Anne Bonny, the pirate queen. Our next queen is huge. I even had to put her in a jumbo-sized test tube just so she would be able to turn around. She's also a golden carpenter ant, and I just love her brilliant gold color. I want her name to be grand and royal, so I'm thinking Queen Midas. She's definitely my favorite. The only thing that worries me is that she still doesn't have any eggs after 2 weeks. I'm really hoping she pulls through, but only time will tell. Our final queen is a totally different genus altogether. This is the Queen of Spades, a harvester ant. And as you can see by her pile of brood, she's definitely in the lead so far. But she had a bit of a head start since she was shipped to me. 1 week later, and it's time to check on their progress. The box and foam block help to keep it quiet and dampen vibrations. The test tubes provide a water source and humidity for their eggs. This simulates the founding chamber that they would naturally create for themselves in the wild. Here's our first colony, which I've named the Relic Raiders. I'm still deciding on a name for her though, maybe Laura Croft or Indiana. She's looking healthy and has laid another egg. That's 5 eggs for the Relic Raiders. Second is Queen Mary, who still doesn't have any eggs. Once a new queen mates, their wings typically fall off and they use the protein in that leftover muscle tissue to feed their first batch of larvae. We'll give her 1 more week. Next in line is the pirate queen, Anne Bonny, which I think I'm going to rename to Aunt Bonny because that would be a missed opportunity. I also have an Aunt Bonny who lives in Montana and she's the best. I'm naming her colony the Golden Galleons to go with the pirate theme. No change in the number of eggs from last week. Now, let's check on the Queen of Spades, who seems very active right now. Taking a closer look, I can see that... Hold up. Last week she had 9 eggs, 1 pupa, and 3 larvae. There's the pupa, the eggs, but she's missing a larva. She must have eaten it. Sometimes queens will eat their brood if they're stressed out or no longer feel safe. It's common for them to eat their eggs during shipping, but that was 3 weeks ago. She still has plenty of brood, so I'm not too concerned, but let's hope she doesn't eat any more. Finally, it's time to check on Queen Midas. I'm really nervous that she still may not have any eggs. Here we go, the moment of truth. Yes, she has eggs. This girl took her time, but managed to finally lay 3 decently sized eggs. I now declare your new colony the Minions of Midas. Keep up the good work. Week 4 started out pretty well. Queen Midas still has 3 eggs from last week. Aunt Bonny still has 7 for the 3rd week in a row, so I think she might be done. The Relic Raiders gained 2 more, so they are also now at 7. Queen Mary wasn't looking too good. So rather than let her starve to death in a tube, I figured the best thing I could do was to release her outside. When I went to check on the Queen of Spades, I noticed something was terribly wrong. She had eaten the pupa. Why? The life cycle of an ant goes from egg, larva, pupa, then finally an adult worker. Was she hungry? Maybe she needed more protein for the rest of the brood. If so, why eat the one that was just a week or two away from becoming her first worker that could bring her food? This didn't make any sense. I placed a fruit fly in her tube in hopes that that would stop her from eating any more, and left her for another week. After last week, I was nervous to check on the Queen of Spades, so I'll save her for last. The Relic Raiders were looking good, with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 eggs? That's one less than last week. Not you too. This had me worried about the others, but to my surprise, Aunt Bonnie had actually laid one more. After 3 weeks with 7 eggs, I thought she was done. So that's 8 now for the Golden Galleons. Now for Queen Midas, who has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's 2 more from last week. She is really cool to watch, and because she's so big, you can see a lot of details. It was such a relief to see her looking strong and healthy. On the other hand, we have our problem child, who has yet again eaten 3 more of her eggs. Stop eating your babies. Something was very wrong with the Spades, and that's when I realized just how filthy their test tube was. Maybe these conditions were the cause of our problems, but I don't want to cause her any more stress. So I connected a clean test tube and gave her 24 hours to move in. The next day, I pushed out her test tube, only to find that she was still there. That's when I noticed that her water was almost empty, so she wouldn't be able to stay there for much longer anyway. Something had to be done, but I couldn't just dump her into the new tube. This transition needed to be as stress-free as possible. So I left the old test tube exposed to light to encourage her to retreat into the dark safety of the clean tube. I kept an eye on her for about an hour, and she showed little interest in venturing into the cave anytime soon. So I wrapped the new tube in foil to make it nice and cozy so I could put the other queens away. I left her for another hour. No movement. It was now a standoff at this point between me and the Queen of Spades. Another hour went by. This girl was not moving. She was stubborn, and was making it clear that she wasn't gonna move. Maybe she was stressed out. I can't imagine why. Then I just happened to walk in at the right moment, right as she was picking up a larva and carrying it into the tunnel. Finally, she was moving in. But after checking in a while later, she hadn't moved the rest. Finally, after 6 hours, I found that the tube was empty. The Queen of Spades had moved out. With a sigh of relief, I disconnected the old tube and took a closer look. She was clearly agitated, but hopefully this new home would be the answer to our problems. I reunited her with the other queens and left her for another week. My heart was pounding. What would I find in the Spades test tube? With a steady hand, I slowly pulled out the tube to reveal the queen. And there she was. And this is what remained of her brood. A mere 5 small eggs. I was crushed. Even though this isn't the end of her story, I was really hoping this video would have a happy ending, but the reality of nature is often brutal. She never ate the fruit fly that I gave her, so I've ruled out hunger and her environment. My only remaining theory is that once a week check-ins are just too frequent for her and causing her to not feel safe. This could also be the case for the Relic Raiders, who also lost another egg this week and is down to 5. We now have a 3-way tie with 5, 5, and 5, as Queen Midas has been slowly but steadily growing her pile. That makes me happy. She is so cool. Lastly, Aunt Bonnie yet again laid another egg, putting her in the lead as our most prolific egg layer with 9 eggs. I'm going to leave them be for 2 weeks this time, in hopes that we'll reverse this downward trend for the Spades and the Relic Raiders. Will it work? We'll have to wait and see next time, as their story continues. Thanks for watching. 4 queens, 4 stories. It's been 3 long weeks since I last checked on my 4 ant queens, who are in the founding stages of starting their own colonies. I've left them alone for a month because last time, the Queen of Spades, my black harvester ant, had been eating her brood week after week despite my efforts to improve her conditions. Now I'm very eager to see their progress. Queen Midas started hiding her eggs as soon as she saw me, protecting her babies like a good mother. She is our biggest queen, and my personal favorite. Her brood is developing slowly but steadily. Now for the other three. The golden galleons has seen a lot of growth. I see 3 cocoons, and even a little larva wiggling its head around asking for food. Kinda cute, and kinda gross. Aunt Bonnie was making huge progress. The queen of the relic raiders had also been eating her eggs in the last episode, and was down to 5. It looks like she still has 5, so it's good that she stopped eating them, but they aren't as developed as the others. I don't even see any larvae yet. And now for the Queen of Spades. I really hope leaving her alone for this long has given her time to feel safe. Maybe she'll have laid a few more eggs, but when I pulled out her test tube, this is what I found. My heart sank. The Queen of Spades was dead. She had also eaten the remaining eggs. I am so sad her story is over. This was an important data point to learn from, though, as the only 2 queens I have ordered online both died. My hypothesis is that the shipping process can be traumatic for a new queen, and that frequent check-ins are more likely to trigger a stress response, causing them to eat their brood. If I do order another queen online, I'm only going to check on her once every few weeks to avoid this. As the following weeks went by, I noticed the remaining queens looking very still and unresponsive. It may not look like they're doing much, but they are hard at work tending to their first batch of workers. Each and every larva needs to be regularly cleaned and fed. In the wild, these queens do not leave their founding chamber to find food. That means they need to feed their growing children with nutrients from their own bodies. They have not had anything to eat in over 60 days, and they look exhausted, but I'm hoping they pull through. 2 more weeks passed without much to report. The queens were busy raising their brood, until one morning when I went to check on Queen Midas. No way! Her very first worker has arrived, and she's beautiful. Look at her beautiful honey color and those big eyes. She's so cute. I can honestly say I've never been this excited about an ant, but I was in for an even bigger surprise when I went to check on the golden galleons. Oh my gosh, 6 workers. They were a full-on colony now. And I could tell by the way they were pulling at the cotton trying to get out, they were hungry. So I decided it was time for the colony's first meal. I prepared a small dish with a drop of honey for sugar and a fruit fly for protein. They were a bit freaked out by the giant object that just invaded their home. They stood there for a while, and before they recognized it was food, you can actually see the queen feeding one of the workers. One brave worker decided to investigate, then immediately started drinking. Aunt Bonnie was next to join the feast and enjoy a well-earned meal. At the time of filming this, it had been 90 days since they were first put in their test tubes, and probably longer since they last ate. Aunt Bonnie and Queen Midas have done it. They beat the odds and made it through the hardest trial of their lives. From this point on, their daughters will now be in charge of taking care of the colony and bringing them food. The queen's job now is to keep laying eggs so the colony can grow. It has been an incredible journey watching this unfold. I've gained such an appreciation for these fascinating and resilient little creatures we often overlook. But the story isn't over, it's just starting. Thank you to all of you for watching, and I will see you in the next update. In the last episode, 2 of my carpenter ant queens, named Aunt Bonnie and Queen Midas, had finally succeeded in starting their own colonies. This is a milestone that an estimated 95% of new queens never reach. Let's start with Queen Midas and her firstborn daughter. She has not eaten in over 3 months, so I think it's time we give the colony their first meal, a drop of honey. When I put the honey in their tube, they were a bit on edge. The queen was not having it, but her daughter bravely ventured towards the mysterious object to investigate. You can see her stretching out her little legs as far as she possibly can, then decided, nope, not worth it. After psyching herself up for a while, she finally found the courage to go for it, and hey, this stuff's pretty good. Mom stayed back to guard the eggs. It was amazing to watch her gaster inflate with honey. You can see the difference before and after. Ants actually have two stomachs, one for their own digestion and a social stomach to hold food to share with others in the colony. You're about to see what that process looks like. Once she had her fill, it was time to feed the queen. This is called trophallaxis, and it's a lot better with sound effects. Told you. Now that Queen Midas and her daughter have been fed, I'm gonna put them back in the box for now, along with the Queen of the Relic Raiders, who I've been leaving undisturbed since she's way behind the other two in development. As for the Golden Galleons, however, they have 6 workers and can now be left outside the box. But I can't quite move them into a formicarium like this until their numbers increase. Ants like tight spaces. So for now, I'm going to connect this small Outworld box to their test tube to make feeding time a lot easier. And there we go. This will be their new setup until they outgrow their test tube. I'll go ahead and give them a bit of protein. The next few weeks were really cool to watch the colonies grow. You can see the workers taking care of the brood, moving them around. Sometimes they even sort them into little piles. Queen Midas has a lot of workers on the way now. You can even see this one inside her cocoon that could hatch any day. After about a month, I checked in on Laura Croft, the Queen of the Relic Raiders. To my surprise, she was vigorously pulling at the cotton, which was very unusual. I thought maybe she was hungry, so I gave her some honey. This is when I realized that her eggs were still eggs. They hadn't even developed into larvae. Now this made sense. I concluded that she is infertile and decided to release her outside. The next day, however, I found that she was still there, guarding her brood. I wasn't sure what to do, so I let her stay in the tube. I've tried several times to release her, but sadly her instincts tell her to keep caring for her babies that will never hatch. I've decided the best thing to do is to bury the test tube and let nature run its course. This again highlights just how few colonies make it to maturity in the wild. Only 2 of my original 5 queens were able to start a colony, and I love these 2 colonies. Thanks to some fellow ant keepers in the comments, I've been able to identify both species. The minions of Midas are Camponotus CAO2. Camponotus is the genus for carpenter ants, and CAO2 is a temporary label because the species has not yet been officially named or described scientifically. They also happen to be the largest species in the United States. The Golden Galleons belong to Camponotus vicinus, a western carpenter ant species that form large colonies with large majors. Originally, I incorrectly thought that she was a golden carpenter ant, hence the name Golden Galleons, but as you can see, they are not gold. So I'm wondering if I should rename the colony but keep the pirate theme. Open to ideas in the comments. The fact that they're different species allows me to observe variations in behavior. For example, the Golden Galleons love to eat fruit flies, and the minions of Midas will literally move fruit flies from their food dish to their garbage pile. The minions are usually spread out in their tube, whereas the Galleons tend to huddle up. Discovering these behavior patterns is so much fun for me, which is why, before ant season is over, I'd like to introduce a new member to our ant family. There's a very special species that I've had my eye on for a while now, but we'll save that for next time. Thanks for watching. A very special package arrived today containing the queen of an ant species I've been wanting to keep for a while now. But before I reveal what she is, let me tell you why they're so fascinating. Ants in this genus are uniquely adapted to thrive in harsh, arid environments with extreme heat, low rainfall, and inconsistent food availability. So, how do these little ants do it? How do you keep food and water readily available during times of drought or famine? Maybe they have little water jugs inside their nest? Well, actually yes. The queen I ordered is part of the genus Myrmecocystus, also known as honeypot ants. Why are they called honeypot ants? Whoa, well it sounds a lot nicer than a lot of other names you could have given them. I mean, look at that dump truck. Big Booty Judy over here got a donk. Good lord. These little water balloons are called repletes. And if you happen to be a replete, your job in the colony is to be a living storage container for food and water. What a calling. But an amazing adaptation. They've got junk in the trunk for the colony's survival. What's your excuse? Alright, let's take a look at the queen. I'm anticipating that she may have eaten her eggs during shipping, so I may have to leave her alone for a few weeks to let her brood develop. But I guess not. She already has workers, and a whole lot of brood. This is great news. I counted 3 workers, 3 cocoons, 3 larvae, and 6 eggs. This one's even giving the queen a bath, which is cool to see. A couple things strike me right away about this colony. The first is the pale color of the workers. It's like a ghostly yellow, which is very unique, and I've never seen ants this light before. The second is just how large their eyes are in proportion to their head. It makes them look cute, for ants. I wasn't sure when they last ate, so I prepared a housewarming meal and waited patiently to see how they would respond. Then without warning, pah! A worker jumped out, then scurried back in. Okay. Then she came out with another worker, and back in. This continued over the next several minutes. The workers would pop out, then go back in. Pop out, and back in. They were so funny and quirky to watch, I feel like I'm already starting to love this colony. Eventually they stopped coming out, but I never saw them touch their food. Checking in the next day, it looks like they just dumped a bunch of junk and crud into their food dish. Not sure what message they're trying to send there. And it looks like the colony's busy with... No. What? How did this happen? I didn't even get a chance to name her. This was so sad. I was really excited about this colony too. A few hours later, I found that they had carried her body out of the nest and left it in the outworld. It seems so unceremonious to leave your beloved queen next to the trash pile, but it is worth noting that they didn't actually put her in the dish with the other garbage. Maybe this was the most honorable place they could find to lay their fallen monarch. I contacted Stateside Ants where I bought the queen, and they were so nice and said that they would send me a replacement. Her species, however, Myrmecocystus mexicanus, was out of stock, so I went with Myrmecocystus semirufus, also known as the half-red honeypot ant. These honeypots are cool because they're bicolored, with dark bodies and red heads. Over the next couple weeks, I saw the workers continue to raise and care for their baby sisters. But once they all mature, that's it. Without their queen, they will die off in just a matter of... Wait, workers have a lifespan of 1 to 3 years? Oof, that's a long time to care for just 15 ants. Well, I guess they need a name then. Seeing as they have no ruler, I think I'll call them the Antarchists.
A small band of rebels that don't believe in government.
Alright, let's try this again. A very special package arrived today containing the queen ant species, blah 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 blah. Big thank you to Stateside Ants for sending me this replacement. And here they are. They look so cool and have a huge pile of larvae. Okay, now I need to connect an outworld. So I'll just pull out the cotton and whoops, one got out. I was having a hard time getting the test tube to fit, which is why my less than stellar camera work barely captured our escapee returning to the nest. Good. I kept trying but ended up putting a crack in the test tube. Shoot. Now I had ants in the nest, ants in the outworld, and a cracked glass test tube that won't fit. So eventually I'll want to move them into a clean test tube, but the colony has already been under a lot of stress from being shipped. So for now, we're going to take the outworld from the other honeypot ants and swap it with this one. Then another time when things have calmed down, we'll... oh shoot. Okay, brush. I can't. Oh, one of them went in. Oh, okay, he's back out. I'm trying not to crush them, but they just keep butting up right near the entrance. No, this is a mess. Okay, outworld secure. Step 2, scoop them up with brush. Come here. Come on, little one. Nope, not that way. Come on, please get on the brush. Okay, that's one. We got one. Now you. There we go. Oh, there's the third one. Ah, sneaky little devil. And there you go. Hey, let's go. Alright, but now how do I get these girls in here? I waited, but they weren't coming out. They were only interested in the honey. Maybe if all 3 were on the same dish, I could just... Oh, there we go. Ooh, boom. Okay, now everyone's accounted for. No one was crushed. and these two, even now, did not stop eating throughout the entire ordeal. Another time we'll do more observations, but I think the colony has had enough excitement for one day, so for now we'll let them settle in. I do, however, want to give this colony a name before we go. I'm going to name them the Gumdrops. I wanted to go with something fun and playful since honeypots are so bubbly. I'm looking forward to getting to know them and watching the story of the Gumdrops unfold. Thanks for watching. The story of my ant colonies has taken a shocking turn I never could have predicted. The events about to unfold will leave you on the edge of your seat. There is a lot to unpack in this episode, so let's go back to 3 weeks ago. I have 2 colonies of carpenter ants, the minions of Midas, ruled by Queen Midas, and the golden galleons, captained by Aunt Bonnie. Both of these colonies are doing well, and were started from single captured queens back in April. Now, their numbers are steadily increasing, and with the introduction of a heating pad, I've noticed some interesting changes in behavior. The galleons started bringing their brood pile into the outworld where it was nice and warm, always leaving at least one worker to stand guard. I was sure to leave part of their setup off of the heat so they could regulate their temperature. The queens tend to stay in the cooler areas, while many of the workers like to cozy up where it's warm. Everything was going great, until one day, I found a daughter of Queen Midas lying on her back in the outworld. She was dying. The rest of the colony seemed fine, so I didn't raise any alarms. I knew that a queen's first workers are smaller and don't live very long, so perhaps she was the first and this was just her time to go. Little did I know, this was the start of a devastating chain of events. The next day, I discovered another worker dead in the outworld. Then, to my horror, I found that the rest of the colony was dying too. No! This was terrible! Thankfully, Queen Midas was still alive, and there was one remaining worker that was frantically trying to escape. What was going on? Queen Midas crawled to the back of the tube and started lying next to the dying workers, almost as if she was mourning the loss of her children. The last living worker was still panicked and looking for a way out. Soon, Queen Midas joined her in the outworld. This was her first time leaving the test tube in over 6 months, so something was definitely wrong. I had to get them out of there immediately, but I didn't have another test tube large enough to hold her. Improvising, I held up the entrance to an empty nest, offering her an opportunity to escape. She accepted the offer fairly quickly and ventured into the mouth of the cave. It's sad. This nest was going to be her colony's new home in just a matter of weeks once they had enough workers. As she explored the new space, my heart was pounding, hoping that this new home would not instead become her grave. With a damp Q-tip, I very carefully extracted the remaining eggs and larvae, then gently placed them into the nest. I did the same with the last worker. Now that the survivors had been relocated, I had to figure out what on earth was happening to the minions of Midas. I wondered if it was mold related or some kind of bacteria in their setup, because upon checking the other colonies, it looked like business as usual. But this was sudden and deadly, which suggests it was something they ate. But then again, the other colonies looked fine. Maybe I had given them a bad mealworm, since the other colonies preferred fruit flies. I started scouring the internet for answers, but was left scratching my head. I was restless all night, hoping she would be okay. The next morning, I stood there, terrified to look into the nest, afraid of what I would find. Reluctantly, I removed the cover and peered into the nest. Oh, thank God, she was still alive, and she had moved the brood pile into the nest with her, which was a good sign. The worker was acting strange, which told me she wasn't going to make it. And later that day, I found the last minion of Queen Midas in her final moments. This means that even if Queen Midas pulls through, she will have to start over from the founding stage with no workers coming to feed her. But she has done it before. Maybe she can do it again. The next day, I kept a close watch on Queen Midas. She had left the nest, which was strange. But before we go any further with her, I need to talk about the difficulties I've been facing with the Gumdrops, my new colony of honeypot ants that just arrived the day before this tragic event. You see, up to now, I've pretty much only been giving the colonies drops of honey for their sugars. It's convenient, doesn't go bad, and the ants love it. But the gumdrops are a lot smaller than my other ants, and I didn't get footage of this, but 2 of the gumdrops on separate days ended up getting stuck in the honey. I did my best to free them, but one was injured in the process and the other didn't make it. So I tried soaking a small cotton ball in sugar water, but that ended up making the test tube way too humid and one of them drowned. I also accidentally closed the lid on another one while trying to keep them contained during feeding. Now we're down to 5, and needless to say, I am off to a rocky start with the gumdrops. And then I find this, a member of the Golden Galleons stuck in honey. What? Later, I found one of the Antarctists suffered the same fate. Seriously? Why is everyone getting stuck in honey all of a sudden? Haven't we had enough death for one weekend? But my troubles were far from over. The next day, I had discovered another Golden Galleon worker had died, and there were body parts strewn about the outworld like a murder scene. What was going on? It was clear this was no longer a coincidence. Whatever happened to the minions of Midas is starting to happen to the other colonies. I continued searching for answers until I came across a Reddit thread talking about how fruit can contain traces of insecticides, which by definition are designed to kill insects. I froze. Before the gumdrops had arrived, I had given all 3 colonies a piece of apple as a treat. Did I accidentally poison my ants? Another post said that flea powder for dogs can kill ants. I thought back and I did apply some flea oil to Chester a couple weeks ago. Maybe I had pet him, then handled their food or feeders without washing my hands? The fruit or oil seem like the most likely explanations, but I just don't know. If any experienced ant keepers out there have insight, please share so we can all learn from this together. Okay, now checking back in on Queen Midas. She wasn't behaving normally. She was in the outworld, away from her babies. I gave her access to anything she might need: water, sugar, and protein. She wasn't interested. Instead, it looked like she was trying to get out. Where was she trying to go? Then, it occurred to me that she might be seeking the comfort of something familiar. She had just been through a traumatic event, and after losing all of her children, was in a new, strange place, all alone. So I cleaned and attached her old test tube. A while later, she was no longer in the outworld, and not in the nest. She had retreated back to the home she's known for most of her life. That made so much sense. I opened the nest and gently retrieved the eggs. There was definitely a visible response once I had returned her babies, and I feel like briefly we had a small moment of connection between us. Please don't give up, Queen Midas. Hang in there. The next day brought more bad news. Queen Midas was okay, but Aunt Bonnie's crew was dropping like flies. She was now down to 2 workers, and the rest of the setup looked like a battlefield with limbs and antennas scattered about. A couple of the Antarctists were not doing well either. I feel absolutely terrible. I've been doing everything in my power to help these little ants thrive, and I may have unintentionally spelled their doom. That evening, just as I was thinking Queen Midas was going to be okay, my worst fear was realized. No. I couldn't bear to see her like this. I am so sorry I let you down, Queen Midas. From the moment I saw her back in April, she was immediately my favorite, and we've watched her journey from the very beginning, persevering through the founding stage, welcoming her first daughter. Had it not been for my mistakes, she would have gone on to build an impressive kingdom. Goodbye, Queen Midas. I am so sorry your reign was cut short. Each passing day, I've been holding my breath to see whether or not the Pirate Queen and her crew would be able to weather the storm. For the next several days, they didn't move much, staying closely huddled together around the brood pile, until I noticed 2 of the workers moving the brood over the warm heat mat, which was a positive sign of normal activity. Unfortunately, one finally succumbed to the same fate as the others, leaving Aunt Bonnie with just 1 first mate at her command. Even if this worker survives, this puts the colony in a delicate state, especially since they will need to be put into hibernation soon. 2 weeks have gone by, and I think it's safe to say the storm has passed. A couple more of the Antarctists also died, But now, new life has emerged from their cocoons. The surviving colonies will need a bit of time to recover, but I am so thankful that there was a triumph at the end of this chapter. I thought all 3 colonies were going to get wiped out, game over. This makes Aunt Bonnie the sole survivor of the original 5 queens I started out with. At that time, I had no idea that the hobby of ant keeping would be such a dramatic tale of love and loss. This is definitely a learning process, though, and I encourage those of you who have been doing this a while to continue sharing your expertise with those of us starting out. I really hope my next video can just be a wholesome little story about ants being ants without all this death and suffering, but we'll just have to wait and see, as the story of the ants marches on. In the last episode, a devastating plague nearly wiped out my ant colonies, but the remaining survivors are not out of the woods yet. Winter is coming, and if they aren't prepared for hibernation in time, it could be the end of my carpenter ants. This is the story of my ants' race against the clock to ready themselves for the long nap looming ahead, and the exciting arrival of something new, which will change everything. Welcome to the Story of the Ants, Part 6. If you've been enjoying this series and I've earned your appreciation, hit like and subscribe for more content like this. Now back to the story. Let's start by checking in on the state of each colony after the tragic event that killed many of my ants, including my favorite colony, the minions of Midas. This was likely caused by either an apple that I fed them containing pesticides, or flea oil left on my hands after petting my dog, then handling their food. First up, they're the Antarchists, a sort of failed colony of Mexican honeypot ants that lost their queen. Their numbers have continued to dwindle since the event, to the point where once all of their brood develop, their colony will consist entirely of just 4 feisty rebels. Then, there are the gumdrops, my colony of half-red honeypot ants who weren't poisoned like the others, but suffered their own series of unfortunate deaths. I'm learning now that this could be stress-related, and that honeypots are more sensitive than other species while the colony is still small. They are now down to just 4 workers, a pile of larvae, and their queen. They haven't been very active since I got them, and shown little interest in food or protein for the brood. Finally, there are the golden galleons, my beloved carpenter ants who were hit the hardest. This colony was reduced to just the queen and a single worker. Thankfully, they do have some brood, which I've seen the last worker diligently tending to. There is a chance that the larvae were also poisoned by food passed on from affected workers. But at least I know that these 2 pupae are safe, since they don't eat during that stage of development. Think of it like a caterpillar cocoon butterfly situation. The larvae eat a bunch of food and protein to grow. Then as a pupa, it's just focused on transforming its body into an ant. I'm hoping these 2 cocoons hatch soon, because their clock is ticking. You see, most species undergo a type of hibernation in the winter called diapause. As winter approaches, queens will stop laying eggs, while workers lose interest in finding protein for the brood. They'll instead stock up on sugars to sustain them through winter, causing the larvae to pause development and enter a dormant state. As temperatures continue to drop, many species even produce an antifreeze in their bodies to keep from freezing solid. Isn't that amazing? Now, you might be thinking, do ants really need to hibernate to endure the cold, harsh, and unforgiving winters of San Diego? Which is a fair question, but it actually doesn't matter what temperature it is outside. Diapause is a part of their natural biological clock, and if you don't allow them to do so by keeping them awake in a warm space, it can negatively affect the health and lifespan of the colony. Imagine not sleeping all weekend, then trying to go to work on Monday. You're not going to feel good, nor is it good for you. So, ant keepers will hibernate their ants in a wine fridge at around 50 degrees Fahrenheit from November to March. Now, the galleons have already been showing signs that they're preparing for diapause. Aunt Bonnie hasn't laid any new eggs in a while, and the worker hasn't shown much interest in the protein that I've been offering. Putting them into hibernation is certainly not ideal with the colony being so small. So I sought the advice of a more experienced ant keeper who recommend waiting until the end of November to give the pupa a chance to hatch. Because while larvae can go dormant, eggs and pupa usually don't survive diapause. Therefore, Aunt Bonnie and her first mate have some work to do before they can be put in the fridge. Since this worker now has such an important role, I decided to give her the name Mary Read. For reference, Aunt Bonnie and Mary Read were history's most infamous duo of female pirates during the golden age of piracy. I keep the ants on a shelf by my desk so I can check on their activity throughout the day. Mary will typically bring the brood out over the heat mat where it's warm and just babysit them for hours. But then I'll catch glimpses of something I've only managed to capture on camera once. Aunt Bonnie will wander out, pick up the brood, and take it back into the nest. This would happen multiple times a day. Mary would be out with the brood, then Aunt Bonnie would come along and bring them back in. Mary would then take them back out, and Aunt Bonnie would steal them away again. It's like they were having an ongoing squabble about how to raise the children. I've never seen anything like it before. So while we let them work that out, I do have some news to share with you. Even though our beloved Queen Midas could never be replaced, that's exactly what I did. I actually got my hands on another colony of Camponotus CA02. Now, why would I do that? Well, the reign of Queen Midas was tragically cut short before we could see her kingdom's full glory. So I figured this way, her legacy could be carried on by a successor. This is Queen Midas II, and she will be inheriting the throne for the minions of Midas. This species is just too fascinating to let go of. Their coloration alone is beautiful, but their size is what's truly impressive. As the largest Camponotus species in the US, the queens range from 21 to 24 millimeters, or almost an inch, and can live up to 15 years. They are also a polymorphic species, meaning multiple forms. So, once the colony's big enough, the queen will start producing majors that can be almost as big as she is. Taking a closer look, you can tell that they're ready for diapause. Their booties look like big green Christmas lights from filling up on green sugar water for the long winter ahead. There were also no eggs to be found anywhere in the tube, only a single larva being held by this worker. So, I asked my in-laws the very normal request if I could keep ants in their wine fridge for a few months. I'm sure they had a good laugh over that one. I am truly the nerdy son they never had. First, we brought the fridge up to room temperature. Then after reading them several bedtime stories and tucking them in, I gently placed them in the bottom rack. Each day, we gradually reduced the temperature so they could acclimate. Even though I know this is what the ants need, it still feels weird leaving them in here and makes me a little nervous since I've never done this before. Good luck, minions of Midas. We will see you in the spring. The next day, I made a sad discovery. Mary Read didn't make it. She was a fighter though, and lasted 11 days longer than the others, carrying out her duties until the very end. This certainly raises the stakes for Aunt Bonnie. Without workers, a queen must rely solely on her own reserves for survival, which is significantly more challenging before winter without the resource management that a colony provides. It's now more crucial than ever that these two pupae develop, and there are only 3 weeks left until December 1st. The days start to pass by, and she needs to be bulking up on sugars, but she doesn't seem too interested, which makes me wonder if she's already trying to go into diapause. Not yet, girl. We need you awake a little longer, so drink up. I'm not sure whether this is good or bad, but I noted that the pupae are looking more wrinkled than before. There was now just over a week left in November, so I continued offering both sugar and protein. It looks like this time some of the nectar was gone, but I still couldn't tell if she drank it or if the water evaporated. She had moved the fruit fly into the other dish though, so at least she knows that it's there. It was now November 28th, with only a few days left until December 1st. I went to check and she was stuck in the nectar. Shoot, I had left the nectar for too long and it dried up and became a sticky glob. She's probably been like this all night too. Dang, I had to get her out of there. So I diluted the nectar with a couple drops of water, which allowed her to pull herself free. Phew, I'm glad she was out. But now, I was worried if this incident would cause other problems. For one, this probably induced a lot of stress, which is dangerous for single queens. Second, she was now covered in nectar without workers to clean her. introducing a risk of bacteria, or simply getting stuck in the cotton from being sticky. Thankfully, the next day she was okay, but at this point I was starting to question whether or not the pupa were even still alive. I noticed that the cocoons looked more shriveled and darker than they used to. Just when I was starting to think they may have died, I caught this. Right there. Did you see it move? It's alive! It's alive! We are so close now. And hold up, do you see what I see? She laid a new cluster of eggs. Normally this would be great news, but girl, it's a bit too late for that. At any rate, the colony won't let that protein go to waste and will recycle the eggs in time. A couple weeks later, and December 1st had come and gone. Aunt Bonnie is now officially up past her bedtime, but she is finally hanging out by the food dish drinking the nectar, which was a relief. I keep checking on the cocoons, thinking they'll emerge any day now. I mean, look at them. I can see all of their features, antennae and legs. Come on, little buddies, you can sleep for like 3 months straight after this, but first you need to come out, eat a bunch of sugar, and take care of your queen. The next couple days, I noticed that she was spending most of her time on the other side of the test tube, away from the brood, but I wasn't sure why. Her behavior started changing too. She seemed more agitated, and I even caught her scratching at the tube and flipping onto her back. That's when I realized I had probably been checking on her too frequently because I wanted to catch the pupa emerging on camera. What she needed now was to be left alone for several days in a dark, quiet environment. I figured this will allow her a chance to settle down, give the workers time to eclose, and then I can feed them a big meal before putting them into diapause for the winter. And that brings us to the present moment. Seriously, at this point in the story, you have caught up to what I've written in the script, and here we are, staring at the box. I have been on the edge of my seat for the last 5 days, wondering what happens next, and we're about to find out together. No. This was not how the story was supposed to go. Aunt Bonnie was supposed to be the prevailing survivor that beat the odds, revived the colony, went into diapause, only to emerge next spring stronger than ever with a new crew at her command. But alas, a difficult realization I've had to accept since making these videos is that I can embellish the presentation of the story, but I do not get the luxury of crafting the plot. Okay, so what did we learn? First off, I was checking on her way too often. Therefore, I believe stress is ultimately what killed her. So as much as I wanted to monitor her progress every day, I should have put her back in the box for a week at a time once Mary Reed passed on. As for what happened to the pupa, I learned that their cocoons need to be opened by other workers or the queen, as shown in this video by Ants Canada. Maybe Aunt Bonnie thought the task of opening the pupa's cocoons was still no longer her responsibility, and it just didn't register to her that there were no more workers left to do so. We're working with an ant brain after all. Remember how she started hanging out on the other end of the test tube, which was strange? My guess is that the pupa died from not being able to get out of their cocoons, then began decomposing, which is why she was keeping her distance. It's hard not to feel like I completely failed my first year of ant keeping. I lost all of my original queens, the gumdrops have been randomly dying off, and 2 other colonies I haven't even revealed on this channel yet have also been losing workers. I actually have more than enough content of just the gumdrop shenanigans during this time period to fill an entire episode. If they make a comeback, I'll tell you the full story. But for now, just know that I'm doing everything I can to help them bounce back. Without any healthy colonies to show for all my time and hard work, it's had me questioning whether or not I should even continue keeping ants. But then I remembered this clip from an interview Ants Canada did with John Yee from Just Ants.
You might fail during the first few tries. You might get upset if your queen passes on or if your colony fails to establish. Never, give up. Keep trying.
I'm learning now that this is just kind of part of the process of learning this hobby. I've been so encouraged by all of the feedback, validation, and support that I've received from everyone in the comments. It seems like I am far from the only one that has lost their colonies from events both in and outside their control. The difference is that I like to get people emotionally invested in my little experiments by giving them names and heartfelt stories. No, this is not the end. After giving it some thought, I believe that there are more stories to be told, with new characters that will rise to glory. I think that the best stories are yet to come, and that this year will bring more exciting adventures. In fact, I already have plans in the works for future episodes, which I'm excited to show you. But you'll just have to wait until next time, as the story of the ants marches on.